The ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, the medieval alchemists, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, various magical orders, mystical Christian communities, Sufi circles, Kabbalistic groups, they all understood something that modern society is starting to forget now as they sit alone at home on their phones. But here's something I need to be honest about, and I'm sharing this because I know that many of you listening right now will recognize yourself in what I'm about to say. Even after discovering the power of group consciousness, even after experiencing these incredible breakthroughs in group settings, I found myself retreating back into my comfortable, isolated world. I'd become really good at creating content alone, at connecting with people through screens, at facilitating non-local group consciousness through our Saturday meditations that thousands of people would do simultaneously from their homes. Today, we're talking about the secret to transformation that nobody is talking about. And that is group consciousness. There's a secret that every ancient mystery school, every transformational leader, and every person who's experienced a quantum leap in their life knows, but almost no one talks about. It's hidden in plain sight, backed by decades of scientific research, yet completely ignored by the self-help industry, by manifestation teachers, by coaches. I discovered it by accident, even though I philosophically knew and I sort of heard some of the studies on it, and it shattered everything I thought I knew about how transformation actually works, about how to create shifts in timelines. Every major breakthrough in your life, every quantum leap, every moment where you felt like you stepped into a completely different version of yourself wasn't actually something you did alone. The most powerful transformational tool isn't individual meditation, therapy, or even timeline shifting, but something that happens when consciousness unites with focused intention. I've been studying transformation for over 2 decades now. I've researched everything from ancient wisdom traditions to cutting-edge quantum physics, from consciousness studies to neuroplasticity. I've created thousands of meditations. I've helped millions of people shift their reality. And I thought I understood how transformation worked. But then I discovered something that completely changed everything I thought I knew. Something so powerful that it's been used throughout history by every wisdom tradition and religion, yet something that modern society has almost completely forgotten. Today I want to share with you the secret to transformation that nobody talks about. And by the end of this episode, you're going to understand why some of the most profound shifts happen not in isolation, but in the field of collective consciousness. I'm not being theoretical. What I'm sharing is backed by decades of scientific research, validated by thousands of years of spiritual practice, and proven by the incredible transformations I have personally witnessed when people come together with shared intention. And at the end, I'm going to guide you through an experience that will show you exactly what I mean on a non-local level, which is still just an inkling of what is available for group consciousness that forms in person. And that is my focus. Let me start with a story that completely changed how I understood transformation. For years, I was doing my quantum jumping work, timeline shifting, future self-integrations, reality transurfing, all of it solo. And don't get me wrong, I was having incredible results. I experienced incredible miracles. It's one of the reasons I wrote my book, but I was not doing a lot of work in groups. When I did, it was always on Zoom. I was shifting timelines regularly, connecting with higher versions of myself, creating massive changes in my reality. My meditations were helping people around the world step into new versions of themselves. I had developed the whole methodology around individual transformation. I believed, like most people in this space, that transformation was fundamentally a solo journey. You go inward. That's what we're taught. We go inward. We do the work on ourselves. We shift our own consciousness, and then our reality reflects the change back to you. You can't help but read Neville Goddard and think, I can just sit in my room and do this by myself. And you can. But then something happened that completely shattered my understanding of how transformation actually works. I was at a small gathering, maybe 15 people, just friends and some people who had been following my work for years. We were having dinner, talking about consciousness and reality shifting, and someone suggested we do one of my timeline shifting meditations together. We did a group quantum jump. It wasn't planned, it wasn't formal. We just spontaneously decided to do it as a group. Now, this was a meditation I had done hundreds of times alone. I knew every nuance of it, every level of experience it could produce. I thought I had explored every dimension of what was possible with this particular technique. But what happened that night changed everything. As soon as we began, I could feel something different. The energy in the room shifted in a way I had never experienced before. It was like the volume got turned up to 11, but not just louder, deeper, more dimensional, more real somehow. People were accessing future selves they had never connected with before. The visions were clearer than anything they had experienced in solo practice. Many people came to me and they said they had been able to visualize better than ever before. They experienced visceral connections with their greatest timeline. The emotional shifts were deeper. One person started crying as they integrated a version of themselves they said they didn't even know existed. Another had such a profound shift, they looked like a completely different person when we finished. It looked like their face was different. But here's the part that really blows my mind. In the weeks and months that followed, the manifestations that came from that one group session were happening faster and bigger than anything I had seen from solo practice or even non-local practice in Zoom groups. Not just for one person, but for everyone who was there. One person completely changed careers within 2 weeks. Another met their soulmate. Another had a financial breakthrough that solved problems they had been working on for years. It was like the timeline shifts that had happened in a group session created ripple effects that were far beyond what any of us had experienced working alone in our bedrooms. And that's when I realized I had been thinking about transformation all wrong. I had been approaching it like individual drops trying to create waves in the ocean. What if the real power comes when drops come together and recognize they are the ocean? So I started paying attention. I started going to events. I went to Aaron Doughty's event. I went to several others in LA, in Sedona. In fact, I sort of became addicted to going to these events. Sometimes I would hide in the back and not ask questions because people would recognize my voice when I would speak up, as it happened in Aaron's event. I had been going to these group events for years. I loved watching Abraham, Bashar. It's so amazing to go to these live events. I really enjoyed the whole experience. Every time I did group work, whether it was future self-integrations or timeline shiftings or any other transformation technique, something exponentially more powerful was happening. It wasn't just addition. 1 + 1 wasn't equaling 2. It was like 1 + 1 = 10 or 20 or even more. So I started digging into the research to understand what was actually happening. This felt like when I discovered reality transurfing. And what I found not only explained my experiences, it opened up possibilities I had never even imagined. But here's something I need to be honest about, and I'm sharing this because I know that many of you listening right now will recognize yourself in what I'm about to say. Even after discovering the power of group consciousness, even after experiencing these incredible breakthroughs in group settings, I found myself retreating back into my comfortable, isolated world. I'd become really good at creating content alone, at connecting with people through screens, at facilitating non-local group consciousness through our Saturday meditations that thousands of people would do simultaneously from their homes. And there is nothing wrong with that. It obviously works. I love it when we do those, but something was missing. I realized I had become comfortable hiding behind my screen. I could reach millions of people without having to be physically present with anyone. I stopped doing RealityCon events and just started working in my laboratory alone. I could create profound experiences through guided meditations without having to look anyone in the eye, without having to be vulnerable in real time, without having to step outside of my own protective shell. I was in my bubble of reality and it was perfect, but I had a calling from within. My higher self called me to do this. And if I'm being completely honest, part of me preferred it that way. It felt safer to be alone, less messy, more controlled. But then I started noticing something. I was teaching people about transformation and connection while I myself was becoming increasingly isolated. I was helping people access group consciousness from a distance while avoiding the very thing I was teaching about. I had all the knowledge, all the techniques, but I was missing the one thing that makes it all real: authentic, in-person human connection. I know many of you listening right now are in the same place. You're comfortable with your online communities, your digital connections, your solo practice. It's easy to go to your Facebook group, to watch the next YouTube video. You're probably really good at connecting with consciousness through your screen. I became very good at it. Through meditations, it scratched my itch. I could create non-local group effects through virtual experiences. And maybe like me, part of you has convinced yourself that that is enough. But it's not. And deep down, you know it's not. There's something irreplaceable about being in the same space with other human beings, breathing the same air, feeling each other's presence, looking into each other's eyes as you explore the deepest parts of yourself. This is something I was resisting. So you may have watched the previous episode I had with Kyle Boyd, where we announced our retreat that sold out right away in September, which I can't wait to experience, at the Golden Heart Estates in Maine. And it's also why we immediately set up another event in Los Angeles at the LA Hilton on November 21st through the 23rd. I really hope that I get a chance to work with you there. You can sign up at www.brianscottlive.com/event-November. And creating this event wasn't about teaching group consciousness techniques. It is my intentional decision to break out of my own shell, to step into the vulnerability and messiness and beautiful unpredictability of real human connection, and I am inviting you to do the same. What I discovered was that there had been serious scientific research into group consciousness for decades, but it was buried in academic journals and ignored by mainstream culture. The most significant study I found was a 17-year landmark research project that completely validated what I had been experiencing. Researchers at Maharishi International University conducted this massive study from 2000 to 2016, tracking what happened when a critical mass of people practiced meditation together with focused intention. They were specifically looking at whether group consciousness could affect not just the individuals involved, but the entire surrounding population. Here's what they found. And I want you to really let this sink in. When the size of their meditation group reached about 1,725 people, which represents the square root of 1% of the US population, something extraordinary happened. National stress indicators across the United States began to decrease dramatically. We're talking about murders decreasing by 6 to 21%. Rapes, aggravated assaults, robberies, all dropping significantly. Infant mortality rates went down. Drug-related deaths decreased. Vehicle fatalities dropped. Even child deaths from injuries were reduced. This wasn't correlation. This was controlled study that tracked these changes over 17 years. And the part that proves causation, when the size of the group began to decrease, all of these stress indicators started rising again. When the group dropped significantly in 2013, there was what the researchers called a shock to the US national consciousness, and all the stress indicators suddenly began rising back toward their baseline levels. So a relatively small group of people focused in meditation with shared intention was able to influence the consciousness and behavior of hundreds of millions of people across an entire continent. They weren't trying to control anyone. They weren't sending out specific intentions for crime reduction. They were simply creating a field of coherence through their collective practice. The researchers called this the field effect of consciousness. Their hypothesis is that consciousness itself has a field-like character, similar to electromagnetic fields or gravitational fields, and when a sufficient number of people experiencing coherent consciousness together, that field becomes strong enough to influence everyone within its range. My argument is, when it comes to timeline shifting, if you can work in a group of 8 or more people, that you will see more profound shifts when you utilize it for manifestation and timeline shifting. I believe that we will reach a point where we can measure scientifically the number of people it requires to experience personalized quantum jumps. I believe we can do that when utilizing the quantum jump techniques and the timeline shifting strategies that I've developed on the channel in a group setting. Miracles will start to happen. I am so excited about this. I want to take this throughout the planet. I want you to help me to facilitate this. I want us to reach the point where we can do it with 1,725 people. The event in Los Angeles is 225 people, and I really hope to see you there. But if not, I promise you, I will try to find additional opportunities to meet with you and meditate with you in person. In fact, I would love to make it possible to meditate with every one of you in person at some point in time. That's my goal. I want to share my space, my electromagnetic field with you, and together we can create a collective social memory complex, a group form of consciousness that will change the world. This is the new earth we have been talking about all along. It's coming together in these groups and facilitating these shifts. And while we can reduce murder rates over the entire United States, specifically to you, we can facilitate complete transformations beyond anything that you originally could imagine. This process allows you to transform your energy. It allows you to shift your own identity with enhanced energy from the morphic electromagnetic field that's created by that group consciousness. Here is where it gets even more interesting. Over 600 separate studies have documented that practices like meditation increase coherence in individuals as measured by brain integration, health improvements, enhanced cognitive skills, and behavioral changes. When you scale this up to group practice, you're not just adding individual coherence together, you're creating something entirely new. Recent research has shown that people who meditate in groups report accessing altered states of consciousness at much higher rates than solo practitioners. I'm telling you that if we integrate my quantum jumping techniques that I'm utilizing that are completely transformational in a group like this, it will be like an ayahuasca experience when done in a group. 43% report unity experiences during group meditation. 47% experience bliss states. 29% have disembodiment experiences. These numbers are dramatically higher than what's reported in individual practice. And what's really got me excited, if group consciousness can shift external reality at the scale of an entire nation, what happens when you combine it with specific transformation techniques like timeline shifting and future self-integration? What happens when you take practices that are already powerful individually and amplify them through collective consciousness? That question led me down a rabbit hole of research and experimentation that has completely revolutionized how I approach transformation work. I want to see you live your very best life. How can I do that? That is my goal. My greatest timeline is watching you transform. And so that's why you're watching me change and evolve my techniques, because that is my goal. To understand how group consciousness amplifies individual transformation, we need to think about consciousness itself differently than most people do. Most people think of consciousness as something that's contained within their individual brain, like a private movie theater where only they can see the show. But consciousness research over the past several decades has been pointing toward a very different model. Consciousnness appears to be more like a field that we tune into rather than something we possess. Think of it like radio waves. Radio waves are everywhere in our environment. They're going through your head right now. But you only hear music when you have a radio tuned to the right frequency. When you're doing transformation work, you're like a single radio trying to pick up signals from higher dimensional versions of yourself, from potential future timelines, from expanded states of consciousness. And this works. You can absolutely create profound shifts working individually. But when you're in a group of people all tuned to the same frequency, all focused on transformation and growth, something extraordinary happens. It's like having multiple radios all tuned to the same station, but instead of just receiving the signal, you're amplifying it. You're creating a broadcast station. That's why timeline shifting works so powerfully in groups. We can change the world when we do timeline shifting in groups. When you're alone, you're accessing potential futures that exist in the quantum field of possibilities. But when you're in a group, you're not just accessing your own potential futures, you're tapping into a collective possibility field. All the potential timelines for everyone in that space begins to interact and amplify each other. It's like the difference between a single candle and a bonfire. A candle gives light, but when you bring multiple flames together, the light doesn't just add up, it transforms the entire environment. Suddenly, you can see things that were invisible before. You can do things that were impossible with just one candle. This is what happens with future self-integration in group setting. When everyone is simultaneously connecting with higher versions of themselves, those future selves begin to interact with each other in the quantum field. The integration process becomes exponentially more powerful. They start to work together because you're not just integrating your own future self, you're integrating into a collective field where everyone's highest possibilities are available. I've seen people in group settings access future selves that were 10, 20, 30 years ahead, versions of themselves they couldn't even imagine when working alone. I've watched someone integrate a future self in one group session after talking with them that represented more growth than they had experienced in months or years of solo work. What makes this both incredibly powerful and potentially dangerous is group consciousness doesn't discriminate. It amplifies whether the collective focus is on hate or love. If a group is focused on love, healing, and growth, it amplifies that. If a group is focused on fear, anger, or destruction, it amplifies that too. This is why understanding the difference between conscious and unconscious group dynamics is absolutely critical. Throughout history, secret societies, mystery schools, magical orders, and esoteric religious groups have gathered in person specifically to access this amplified power. The ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, the medieval alchemists, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, various magical orders, mystical Christian communities, Sufi circles, Kabbalistic groups, they all understood something that modern society is starting to forget now as they sit alone at home on their phones. They knew that when you bring together people with shared intention, trained in specific techniques, committed to transformation, something extraordinary becomes available. They created elaborate rituals, sacred spaces, and precise practices specifically designed to generate and focus group consciousness for manifestation and spiritual advancement. These groups often worked in secrecy, not because they were doing anything dark, but because they understood they were working with real power. They recognized that group consciousness could create changes in both the participants and the world around them that might be misunderstood or feared by those who didn't comprehend what was happening. The medieval alchemists weren't just trying to turn lead into gold through chemistry. They were using group consciousness and focused intention to transform both matter and consciousness itself. The mystery schools weren't just teaching philosophy, they were creating experiences that could fundamentally shift participants into higher states of awareness through collective practice. I would be doing a disservice if I talked about the power of group consciousness without addressing its shadow, because the same mechanisms that can create profound healing and transformation can also create destruction and chaos. Just look at the world. You've seen what happens when groups get swept up in unconscious collective energy, mob mentality, mass hysteria, people doing things in groups they would never do alone, and not in a good way. History is full of examples of group consciousness being used for manipulation, control, and violence. The psychological research into this phenomenon is extensive and sobering. In crowd situations, several things happen that can lead to destructive behavior. People experience what researchers call de-individuation, where they lose their sense of individual identity and personal responsibility. Factors like anonymity, group unity, and heightened emotional arousal can weaken personal controls like guilt, shame, and rational thinking. When people can't see themselves clearly as individuals, when their personal identity gets subsumed into their group identity, they become capable of actions they would never consider when alone. The normal social and moral constraints that guide individual behavior get overridden by collective emotional states. Studies have shown that it only takes about 5% of a crowd to be confident and directed in their actions to influence the behavior of the remaining 95%, often without the majority even realizing they're being influenced. This is how peaceful protests turn violent, how reasonable people can get caught up in destructive mob behavior, how entire populations can be manipulated by charismatic leaders. The difference between transformational group consciousness and destructive mob mentality comes down to several key factors. Conscious group work is characterized by intentional focus on growth and healing. Everyone participating is there by choice, with clear understanding of what they're doing and why. There's trained facilitation maintaining the coherent field, ensuring that the group energy stays focused on positive transformation. Individual sovereignty is respected. You're encouraged to maintain your own discernment and personal boundaries. The foundation is always love, compassion, and unity. Destructive group dynamics, on the other hand, are characterized by emotional reactivity, spreading unchecked through the group. There's often charismatic manipulation by leaders who are more interested in power and control than genuine healing. People lose their individual discernment and start following blindly. The driving emotions are typically fear, anger, or scarcity. The key difference is consciousness itself. In transformational group work, you're not losing yourself in the group. You're bringing your fullest, most conscious self to the group. You're maintaining your awareness while participating in collective consciousness. You're contributing your individual light to make the collective fire brighter, not getting consumed by flames you can't control. This is why I'm so passionate about teaching people how to recognize and participate in this sort of work now, while avoiding the traps of unconscious collective dynamics. Because group consciousness is happening whether we're aware of it or not, The question is whether we're going to participate consciously or get swept up in unconscious collective energy. That's why I'm inviting you to my live in-person event on November 21st through the 23rd in Los Angeles. You can find the details at www.brianscottlive.com/event-November. So how do we harness this incredible power safely and effectively? After years of working with groups and witnessing thousands of transformations, I've identified the essential elements that create successful group transformational experiences. First, you need a sacred container. This is more than just a physical space. Though the environment does matter, it's an energetic space where everyone feels safe to be vulnerable, to explore, to transform. It's created through clear intention, agreed upon guidelines, and the collective commitment of everyone involved to support each other's growth. Second, you need shared intention. This doesn't mean everyone has to want exactly the same thing, but there needs to be alignment around the fundamental purpose. Everyone needs to be there for growth, healing, and positive transformation. When people have conflicting intentions, especially if some are there for ego gratification or to extract energy from others, it disrupts the coherent field. Third, you need proven techniques. This isn't the time to experiment with untested methods. You want to use practices that work reliably for individuals that can be amplified through group consciousness. Fourth, you need skilled facilitators. Someone needs to hold the space, maintain the coherent field, and guide the group through the process. This requires not just technical knowledge of the practice, but real understanding of group dynamics and consciousness. The facilitator is like a conductor of an orchestra, helping all the individual instruments create beautiful music together. Fifth, you need integration support. The transformations that happen in group consciousness can be profound, sometimes overwhelming. People need guidance on how to anchor these shifts in their daily lives, how to integrate new aspects of themselves. When you do timeline shifting work in a group setting with these elements in place, something truly magical happens. Not only are you accessing your own future selves, but you're in a field of consciousness where everyone is doing the same thing. The group creates a permission field where bigger jumps feel possible, where future selves that seemed unreachable suddenly feel accessible, where the integration process happens faster because you're supported by collective energy. I've been developing and refining these principles for years, working with small groups, testing different approaches, learning what works and what doesn't. And I've been dreaming of creating a large-scale experience where we could really explore the full potential of conscious group transformation. Someday we're going to do a live group meditation at the Sphere. I promise you I'm going to find a way. It's on my bucket list. Maybe we can do it in stadiums. I know we can do it. This dream led me to something I'm incredibly excited about. And I mentioned it before, but for the first time ever, I created this 3-day immersive experience where you're going to combine all of these elements, group consciousness, timeline shifting, future self-integration, in one transformational container. This is not just another workshop or seminar. This is what I'm calling the most transformational event I've ever created, because we're going to be working with the amplified power of group consciousness, everyone in coherence, creating quantum jumps that might take months or years to achieve working alone. My friends Kyle Boyd and Leah Rush from the Heart Coherence Collaborative are going to be there with me, and their expertise in this field adds another crucial dimension to what we're creating. Kyle has been recommending my meditations for years because he's experienced firsthand how powerful they can be. In fact, he and Leah first connected because of my meditations. He saw her in a vision during the meditation before they even met. And weeks later, she reached out. But what makes their involvement so significant, Kyle and Leah are experts in heart coherence, which is the physiological foundation that makes group consciousness work. The Heart Math Institute has been researching heart coherence for over 30 years. And what they've discovered is that when we're in coherent heart states, we're not just feeling better individually, we're actually creating measurable electromagnetic fields that can influence other people. Research has shown that the heart generates the largest electromagnetic field in the body, about 100 times stronger than the brain's field. When you're in a coherent heart state, experiencing genuine emotions like appreciation, compassion, or love, your heart rhythm becomes smooth and organized, creating what's called a sine wave-like pattern in your heart rate variability. Where it gets really interesting for group work, studies have demonstrated that when people trained in heart coherence are placed near someone untrained, the untrained person's coherence levels actually increase. The coherent electromagnetic field from one person's heart can completely entrain and influence another person's heart rhythm, creating physiological synchronization between people. Kyle and Leah have been experiencing this firsthand in their recent group work. They just held a retreat themselves. They came back. Kyle was telling me it was one of the most incredible experiences of his life when they created this heightened heart coherent state in a group. They've been documenting how groups of people practicing heart coherence together don't just individually reach coherent states more easily. They create a group field that connects all the members. There's actual scientific evidence that an energetic field forms among individuals in groups through which communication occurs simultaneously. One study showed that when participants focused on achieving increased heart rate variability coherence together, the effects were amplified based on their comfort level with each other. The more connected the group felt, the stronger the coherent field became, which means that when people from the reality revolution get together, and it's always a wonderful thing, everybody is so coherent already that this is going to be amplified. There's some amazing people in the reality revolution. I can't wait to get us together. Another fascinating finding was that mothers and infants naturally synchronize their heart rhythms during positive emotional interactions. And this synchronization doesn't require physical contact. It's happening through the electromagnetic field connection. This is the physiological foundation that makes all the consciousness work possible. When Kyle and Leah help create heart coherence in our group, they're not just helping people feel good. They're helping establish the electromagnetic field conditions that allow consciousness to synchronize and amplify across the entire group. Once again, we're gathering in Los Angeles from November 21st through the 23rd specifically to explore what becomes possible when you combine proven transformation techniques with the field effect of collective consciousness. Here's what makes this experience different from anything I've done before. We're not just doing meditations in a group setting. We're using the group consciousness itself purposely as a catalyst for transformation. Each day, we'll be diving deeper into timeline shifting and future self-integration techniques, but in a field of collective intention where everyone is supporting everyone else's transformation. The breakthroughs you make won't just change your life. They'll add to the collective field that helps everyone else break through too. Remember that study I mentioned earlier, how group consciousness can affect entire populations? Now imagine that same principle applied specifically to your personal transformation, your timeline shifting, your connection with your highest self, your manifestation, your goal, your dreams. But what really excites me about this gathering is we're going to create incredible personal transformations. But when you bring together a group of people committed to stepping into their higher selves, when you combine that with the power of collective consciousness, you're not just changing individual lives. You're contributing to a shift in the collective field itself. Every person who steps into their highest self, who integrates their most evolved future self, adds to the collective possibility for all of humanity. This isn't just about your personal breakthrough, though you'll definitely have those. This is about being part of a group that's actively raising the consciousness of the planet. Now, before we finish today, I want to give you a direct experience of what I'm talking about. Because group consciousness is not limited to physical proximity. It can be accessed non-locally. I am saying that it's not as intense. But with intention, we can create a non-local group connection. Consciousness itself isn't bound by the laws of physics, as we normally understand them. Quantum physics has shown that particles can be entangled across vast distances, influencing each other instantaneously regardless of space and time. My argument is that we become entangled in a close group proximity, and then when we leave, we remain entangled. Consciousness appears to operate on similar principles. When people focus their intention together, when they align their consciousness with shared purpose, they can create coherent fields that transcend physical location. This is how global meditation events can have measurable effects, even when participants are scattered across different continents and time zones. Right now, as you're listening to this, there are thousands of people around the world who are also engaged with this content, who are also exploring these ideas about consciousness and transformation. Even though we're not in the same physical space, we can tap into the collective field through our shared intention and focus. This is what I figured out. I figured out how to do this, and so it made it easy for me to sit at home alone. But we can do this right now. So I want to invite you to participate in a brief experience that will demonstrate the power of a non-local group consciousness. Find a comfortable position and close your eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose and let it out slowly through your mouth. As you breathe, begin to sense the space around you. Feel the boundary of your physical body, but also sense the energy field that extends beyond your skin. Now expand your awareness beyond your immediate physical space. Imagine that you can sense the consciousness of everyone else who is listening to this recording, everyone who has listened to it before, everyone who will listen to it in the future. See if you can feel the invisible threads that connect all of us through our shared intention to grow, to transform, to step into higher versions of ourselves. As you breathe, imagine that each exhale releases any limiting beliefs about what's possible for you. Any fears of participating in group events. Any thoughts that you have to transform alone, that change has to be difficult, that your biggest breakthroughs are still years away. Let all that dissolve with your out-breath. Now with your next inhale, breathe in the collective possibility that exists when consciousness unites with shared intention. Feel yourself connecting not just to your own potential, but to the limitless possibilities that emerge when individual lights come together to create something greater than the sum of their parts. From this space of expanded awareness, I want you to set an intention, not just for yourself, but for everyone who is connected with us in this moment across time and space. Set an intention that we all step more fully into our highest potential, that we all experience the breakthrough we've been waiting for, that we all contribute to the healing and elevation of consciousness on this planet. Feel that intention resonating, not just within you, but rippling out through the field of collective consciousness, amplified by everyone else who is sharing this experience with you. Notice how much more powerful your intention feels when it's supported by this collective field, when you tap into it. Now imagine your future self, the version of you that has fully integrated this understanding of group consciousness, who regularly participates in transformational, collective experiences, who has become a beacon of coherent consciousness in your community. See this future self clearly. Feel their presence. Notice how confident they are, how radiant, how connected to something greater than themselves. Allow this future self to step closer to you, to begin merging with your current awareness. Feel their wisdom, their joy, their deep knowing that transformation is not a solo journey but a collective adventure. Let their energy integrate with yours, knowing that this integration is supported and amplified by the collective field we've created together. Take a moment to anchor this experience in your body. Feel how different you are after connecting with this collective possibility field. Notice the expansion in your chest, the clarity in your mind. Notice the sense of connection and purpose that extends far beyond your individual self. When you're ready, take a deep breath and gently open your eyes. But maintain that sense of connection, that awareness that you are part of something much larger than yourself. What you just experienced is just a taste of what becomes possible when we gather physically in the same space with shared intention. The field effect becomes exponentially more powerful when we are together in person. When we can see each other, feel each other's energy directly, breathe the same air, and create the sacred container together. If this brief experience gave you even a glimpse of expanded possibility, imagine what becomes available when you're in a room with hundreds of people, all focused on the same transformational intention for 3 full days, immersed in the most amazing meditative experiences imaginable. Here's what I want to leave you with today. Group consciousness is happening whether we're conscious of it or not. Every day, you're influenced by the collective field you participate in. The question is whether you're going to participate consciously in fields that elevate and transform you, or whether you're going to get swept up in unconscious collective energies that keep you stuck. You have a choice. You can continue trying to transform alone, in your room, in the dark, which absolutely works, which I always support because it worked for me. Or you can explore what becomes possible when you bring your highest self to a collective field of growth and healing. If you've been feeling called to step fully into your highest potential, if you're ready to experience what timeline shifting and future self-integration and quantum jumping and parallel reality shifting look like when amplified by group consciousness, if you want to be a part of a gathering that's actively contributing to the elevation of human consciousness, then I would love for you to join us in Los Angeles. You can find all the details at www.brianscottlive.com/event-November. But more importantly, start looking for opportunities in your life to participate in conscious group work. Find meditation circles in your community. Create intention groups with friends. Go to the park and create a meditation group that meets in the park every week. Participate in global meditation events. Look for opportunities to bring your light together with others who are committed to growth and transformation. That's why we came here. That's what we're here for. Because the secret to transformation that nobody talks about isn't really a secret at all. It's been hiding in plain sight. Throughout all of human history, we transform fastest and most powerfully when we transform together. Every wisdom tradition has known this. Every indigenous culture has practiced this. We've just forgotten. Of course we forgot in this hyper-individualized modern world, but we're remembering, and you're part of that remembering. Remember, you're not just a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop. And when the drops come together with conscious intention, with shared purpose, with commitment to growth and healing, they can move mountains, shift timelines, and transform the world. The future self you connected with today is waiting for you. The transformations you're capable of are beyond what you can currently imagine, and the collective field that can support your biggest breakthroughs is ready to embrace you. The only question is, are you ready to step into that power? You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. I'd love it if you checked out my art. You can find it at www.newearth.art. Once again, you can register for my most recent event on November 21st through the 23rd in Los Angeles at www.brianscottlive.com/event-November. and welcome to the Reality Revolution.